So my name is Susan Gallo. I'm the executive director at Maine Lakes. I've only been there about 6 months, and when I jumped in November was when I started, and we were in the middle of a big session. So if you were here for the advocacy update, you know we have a big change in administration. We have all new commissioners. So there was a lot going on. It was a crazy session. So I'm just going to walk through some advocacy from local to state to federal level, what Maine Lakes is doing, what you all could do. For anybody who hasn't been active in advocacy, this will hopefully get you motivated to make a call or send an email. How many people here testify on a regular basis? There's no? Oh, okay. So my goal is to have all of you potentially write a letter, send an email by the end of this talk.
There's so much to testify.
I know, and so many good things. It's really exciting. So just starting at just a quick question, just the question of what is advocacy, which is weird. Oh, there we go. Okay. What is advocacy? That's a big question. And of course, the dictionary definition is public support or recommendation for a particular cause or a policy. So a lot of people think like this is advocacy, and it is. You know, marching, protesting is a great tool for advocacy, and it works for a lot of causes, and it's really comfortable for a lot of people. I have teenage daughters who will go to any rally at any time. They make their signs and they show up and they love it, and it's great. And I always have the conversation that it's a great thing to do. But then what next? What do you do next after you've walked with your sign? There's a lot more to do after you carry the signs around. Advocacy, really, talking to Peter Callan the other day, he's not here, but he's in the other session, but asked him his advice about advocacy, and he and I had a long conversation about advocacy as relationships, that really advocacy is all about building relationships with decision makers, with the people in your community, and making sure that they know you, that they trust they trust your expertise, that they know what your passion is and why you're advocating for a particular policy or rule or regulation, and then just making connections in your community. So I'll have some examples of things that don't necessarily look like advocacy, but they could be. So advocacy in your town. Depending on the type of town government you have, knowing your select board members, knowing your town council members are really a first step in advocacy at the town level. What are they doing? What are the issues before your town? And especially getting to know your planning board members. Those are the people that are really going to be, from a lake perspective, they're going to be involved in permitting and development. So getting to know planning board members and your code enforcement officer, really key for your local advocacy. And anytime you can meet with any of these folks, whether it's at the grocery store or you're at your local restaurant or you're getting gas and you run into them, the more you can do that, anytime you can sneak in a reminder of the connection between lake water quality and your town budget or your school budget. That is one thing that really resonates. If anyone heard Maggie earlier today, she was talking about the economic message really resonating globally when you talk about behavior change. If you want people to change their behavior or pay attention on a subject, bringing it down to the economics of it almost always resonates. So making the connection between what percentage of your town budget is paid by lakefront property. In some towns, I think it's Rome, where Peter Callan lives. I think it's 80%. 80% of the town budget is paid for by lakefront homeowner property tax. So that's really a critical piece for a lot of arguments about water quality and all that, but it's also really important for your town officials to know that and recognize it. And I've heard that some towns it's up 90% plus is from lakefront property owners. So making that connection is really critical between that, the value the lakes bring in and your budget. And then anytime you can share information about clean and healthy lakes, why that matters to you, bringing up illustrations of, you know, of a pond like East Pond where they've had the problems with the blooms, how, you know, the direct connection between poor water quality and property values, and what will happen in your town if you don't protect water quality. Some of the things you can do include, you know, inviting them for all the lake associations here. I know most of you have annual meetings in the summer. Consider inviting those folks to your association. If they're not in your association, consider inviting them. Consider having a special, you know, an open house, just to have your members meet with them and get to know them and say hello. There's a really, you might have heard about the Melinda Ann. That's Maine Lake Society's floating classroom. It is a big boat. It's 30 feet. It can't go everywhere. It's got some limits. But one of the things that has been really successful for us in working with Friends of Wilson Lake is we have gone there 2 years in a row, and we're going to go a third year next year. And we go one day and we spend the day with kids in the schools, and then on a Friday, and then on a Saturday we do boat trips for adults, for any adults in the community. But Fowl makes sure that they invite all their selectmen, and we had a nice chat with, I had a nice chat with a code enforcement officer on a boat trip, and we had a long talk about enforcement and what the issues are that he's facing, and I think he got a lot out of the trip, and we go through a lot of the equipment that we use to test water quality. We do a dredge where we pull up plankton and look at it under a microscope on the boat. So we do a lot of sort of fun educational stuff that we do with the kids, and then we try to put it in a context for the town. So I think that's been really, that's been great advocacy on the part of Fowl, and we, you know, Maine Lakes would love to do that with more lake associations, especially connecting the school kids and the town and the advocacy all together. There's a great website, I should have put it on here, but Lakes of Maine. It's a Lake Stewards of Maine website called Lakes of Maine. It has all the data for all the lakes where there's, it doesn't have just Secchi data disk, water clarity data. It has, if there's any lake, almost any lake data in Maine, if it's out there, it's been collected into Lakes of Maine. So you can go on, look up your lake. You can get all kinds of information about water quality. They have a new feature where they do the percentage of buffers around a lake that are developed, which is you know, a good statistic for your town's government folks to know. The less developed a lake is around the edge, the better the water quality protection is in general. And we can help with any of this. We'd love to help with a boat trip. You know, if you need any help putting together an agenda for a meeting, interpreting the Lakes of Maine website data for your lake, we are available to help with that. Yeah.
How many horsepower is the Melinda Ann?
I don't know. It's a big pontoon boat, and it goes. We've never gone fast on it, so I don't know.
It's restricted to 10 horsepower or less.
I don't know.
Probably more.
Probably more. Okay, so that rules us out.
Oh, rats. Yeah.
Is the captain the same one who's been there for years, or is there a new captain?
Yeah, we have two. We have Phil, who's been there for a long time, and then we have Peter Callan, just got his captain's license, and so he comes too. So we have two captains now. So yeah.
Can you give me that website again?
Yeah, Lakes of Maine.
Lakes of Maine.
Yep,
That's it.
lakesofmaine.org.
Got it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, a really, really good resource for anybody who lives on a lake, and you can spend hours just delving into fish database. The loon count database from Maine Audubon is there.
You can link to that from the Lake Stewards Maine
Yep.
website also.
Yes.
It's on that.
Yeah, good reminder. And we should link to it from our website.
Yes.
We should. Maybe we will after tomorrow. I mentioned the schools in Wilton. This is a really good way. I already talked about it, but here's the slide for it. You know, getting involved anytime lake associations can get involved with their schools. There's a bunch of different case studies in Maine that have done amazing things. China Lake is one. Wilson Lake's another. I know there's more, but really connecting. Getting the Melinda Ann, or other thing Maine Lakes is working on is land-based, because it's not always feasible or practical or possible to get the Melinda Ann to a certain lake. It's 30 feet long. If you've ever seen a 30-foot boat on a trailer, it's amazing. It's huge. But if that's not the case, we're working this coming winter, we have some funding to put together some trunks, some land-based kits to try to get lake associations, make some more education accessible for people who can't have the Melinda Ann and or just to make it easier. So we're working on that, and we will keep you posted, and maybe at our lake association, maybe at this conference next year, we'll have some trunks. It's my hope we'll have some trunks to demonstrate to everybody. But anyway, getting involved with schools is really advocacy, because you're working on spreading the word and getting the message out to kids about clean water, who then share it with their parents, and you can get the town. It's a good way to get towns involved. So, advocacy in Augusta, moving up one level. This is where most of Maine Lake's time is spent as a statewide organization. You have a really strong voice in Augusta. Every single person in this room can make a difference with their legislator. And some people think, oh, I'm only in Maine. I only live in Maine part of the year. I'm only on a lake part of the year. Doesn't matter. You can still be an advocate in Augusta. If you pay taxes here, if you visit here, if you spend money here, and if you care about lakes, those are all reasons that your voice is valuable in Augusta. So even if you can email your legislator from Florida, from Portland, Oregon, wherever. If you do any of these things in Maine, you have a voice in Augusta. So just a few quick things about our sessions. We have our legislature cycles is on a 2-year cycle. So right now we just finished the first regular session of the 129th legislative session. Now we're on break. The legislators are on break. I don't know if any of you know they pulled an all-nighter on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday night? They watched the sun come up in Augusta to hammer out the final bits of the budget. They are officially pretty much on summer vacation. They have some bonds still to work out, but they worked really hard. And then the second regular session will start in January of 2020. The first session is open to any kind of legislation. It's wide open. This year, I think, first session was particularly a heavy load because so many environmental bills had been waiting in the wings until there was a more environmentally friendly administration in place in the Blaine House. So we had a particularly heavy dump of good environmental bills, which was great, but did put our legislators, they worked really hard. The second regular session, the one that starts in January of 2020, is a short session. The second session is always a short session. It should only run like January to April, I think. It's shorter. So this one is generally the first session, the long session is January to June. The short session is usually like January to April. So it's a short session. It's limited to either carryover bills, budget bills, or governor's bills, or with anything that's deemed an emergency. So it's a much different session. The second session is shorter, it's less intense, and the door isn't open for anything. So it's really limited in scope. But there can be some really important bills in the second session, but we're really on a biannual cycle. So we won't have a really exhausting year, hopefully again until 2021. So a lot of people, that's news to a lot of people. There we go. So another basic election thing, you might already know this. Everybody in Maine has a two-year term, whether you're a senator or a representative. And then every elections, both bodies turn all over completely every other year, which I did not even know that until I looked it up. I've never paid, I'd vote, but I'd never paid attention to the turnover in our own House and Senate. But it's complete every other year, and then we have term limits that are 2 years. 4 2-year terms. And then people have to take a break, and then they can come back. So, one of the best ways to be an advocate is to vote for people who value lakes and understand the role in their economy. So making sure you ask at candidates' nights or read up or email them or write to them before elections, find out what their position is on lakes and make it an issue. I know that the Maine Conservation Voters, MCV, does an environmental poll of candidates every other year when there's the state elections for the House and the Senate. They do an environmental poll, and so they often have a water-related question, so that's a really good place to start. But also you could ask your own questions. Once your folks are elected, a really good thing to do is figure out who your legislators are, figure out what committees they are, and introduce yourself and share your passion for lake conservation. So how do you do that? Well, you have to figure out what your districts are. We have 35 Senate districts, 151 House districts. I put that up just to show you how diverse we have, especially these House districts. At mainelakesociety.org, we have an advocacy tab. It has a whole bunch of tabs where you can look up your legislator. And it links back to the state's website. So it's easy on the state website, which actually, here you go. State website, if you write anything down today, write down this. Oh, and I forgot, I have a handout for you. Don't let me forget the handout at the end. It has this written down for you. You can go to this legislature.maine.gov. You can look up the Senate. You can look up the House. On each of those tabs, you can look up your senator and your rep by your town. So you go to the Senate page. It'll say look up your senator. You go to your town, and it'll tell you exactly who. Sometimes some towns are split districts, but either way, you'll be able to figure that out from that. And then you could also zoom in on that. On the state webpage, there's a map. You can zoom in on those maps, really zoom in on specific districts. So if you have a question about where you live. So really important to figure out who your people are. And I'll talk about their committees. I'm just going to zoom through the legislative process. Now, some of this, I apologize if it's old news to some of you, but I thought it was worth just going through the whole, from beginning to end. We'll go through pretty quickly, so I hopefully won't bore you, or won't be telling you things you already know. But these are just some icons for the basic steps to a bill. So we're going to start with an idea, and I thought it was interesting that this is from the state. It has an infographic. It says an idea for a bill is developed. Ideas come from various sources. For example, legislators, governor, state agencies, but they're really missing a big piece of it, which is people. Non-governmental organizations, civics groups, coalitions, private sector businesses, individuals, associations, organizations, lobbyists. Really, any of us can come up with a bill idea. And so it's really open to, it's really an open process. Everybody knows who this is, right?
It's Bill.
Well, can anyone sing the song? No.
I'm just a Bill.
Yeah, I'm just a Bill. I asked my daughter, she's a freshman, and I pulled this up and I said, hey, do you know, I was going to tell her, because I used to watch Saturday morning cartoons, and Schoolhouse Rock was, that was like my favorite part of Saturday morning cartoons. And I pulled this up and I said, hey, I got to show you this funny video with this bill. And she rolled her eyes. She said, Mom, she said, you don't get through middle school without watching I'm Only a Bill 10 times in social studies, which I thought that was great. So I'm glad to know Bill is alive and well and being seen by our middle schoolers, at least in our school district. So ideas for bills can come from anywhere. A really good thing to do if you have a bill in mind, if your lake association has a concern or a question that they think a new law might answer, the Law and Legislative Reference Library at the Maine State website is incredibly valuable. Not only you can look up all kinds of different things, but the best thing for them is they have a phone number on their website down, if you click through down here, you can contact them. If you say, hey, I want to know, is there ever a bill that did, Has there ever been a bill that restricted wake boats on lakes in Maine? They will take your request and, sometimes within minutes they'll call you back and say, yes, in 1985 there was, something that was proposed and it failed, or they can tell you a lot about our bills that have been on the table. So not many people know about this, but it's a really good reference if you're thinking about bills. And the other thing to do is to really collaborate with, Maine Lake Society gets involved with bills, Natural Resource Council of Maine as big advocates, Maine Audubon. There's lots of groups out there that have pretty deep histories with what's going on, particularly with lakes. And so we're always happy to hear ideas and help you either formulate the idea or pass it by. There's lots of great lake coalitions in Maine. It's one of the reasons I took this job at Maine Lakes is I knew there was this great network of other lake people out there that would help me with questions about bills. So this is a really great thing to do, is collaborate, find out what other people have been doing, and then of course the big thing is you have to find a legislator. So you have to find a bill sponsor, and that's another thing we can help you with. We know. Not all just us, but our conservation partners can help direct you to a legislator that's friendly to lakes. Often it's easier for you to go to your own legislators will be the most likely to sponsor your bill because they have to listen to you as a constituent. So that's the best approach, and we can help with some strategies for that. But bills are drafted, so they get all the technical language worked out, and then they're introduced. They're introduced on a rolling basis, so you have to submit bill ideas, and bills have to be, you need a title and a sponsor, usually in December, sometimes very early January. It's called cloture. It's when they take all those ideas, and then as the session rolls along, the bills roll out sort of one by one as they're drafted and introduced. So one of the tricky things is tracking bills. There's no easy way to track bills. That's just the bottom line. There is a master list of bill titles that comes out right away, and you could spend days going through. There's thousands and thousands of bills that go in front of the legislature. But we have a lot of help at Maine Lakes. We have a lot of help from Maine Audubon and NRCM help us because they kind of do a first cut of those bills for us, the bill titles. We get that, we get a pared, and then we take that pared down list, and when we highlight which ones are sort of highest priorities for lakes, and we talk with our policy committee on our board, and we do some voting and prioritizing because I'm only one person. And I sat down at the beginning of the session, with 20 bills thinking I could track and, follow 20 bills, and I could not. That was too much for me. But, so a really good thing, we have, there's two things. Well, you can sign up for weekly emails from committees from the State House. Or if you're really interested in a particular committee, and I do have the things. So the committee here, most of the lake bills that we're interested in are the Environment and Natural Resource Committee. We also have some lake bills at Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, and even fewer, but some important ones at Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. So I track 3 committees through the session. I get weekly emails from the committee. They're just, they just come automatically. They tell you what's on the committee, what's on the agenda for the following week. And then what Maine Lakes tries to do, NRCM has a similar system for sort of broader environmental issues. Maine Audubon has one for wildlife-related issues. Maine Lakes is really focused on lakes. We track the bills, we see what's coming when, and then we have legislative alerts. So if you would like so that you don't have to do all of this, you can sign up for legislative alerts at mainelakesociety.org. We have a sign up, and very limited. We really focus on action items. That's when we send out emails to everybody. We do a few here and there that aren't action related, but most of them are when we have something that needs to be done. So when a bill goes to the committee, that's when your job really, as advocates, can really ramp up. So whether or not your legislators on a committee, you can check here to figure out So the really key thing is figure out who's your senator, who's your representative, and what committees they are on. Unfortunately, I'll go to the next one. Hold on. I won't say this quite yet. If you want to submit testimony on a particular bill, the Maine legislature instituted this new testimony submission form, mainelegislature.org/testimony. You can, before you would just email you'd copy all the committee members, and it was kind of tedious, and I think it was just getting too cumbersome for everybody to track their emails. So if you submit a testimony through this portal, you have to know which committee you want to, or you have to pick a committee and you have to pick a bill. So a bill has to be scheduled with a hearing. Then you can go online, you can do this, you can type in your testimony, send it. And the great thing about this is not only will it go to all the committee members, but it will also go, it'll also be recorded publicly on the website, which I'll get to in just a minute, but so I'll come back to that. But this is a really great way to submit testimony. And anybody can submit, in this testimony format, really anybody can, doesn't matter if your rep or your senator is on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, you could still submit this testimony for a specific bill. Everybody will get it and it will rise to the top. You can also, of course, along with that, if you use the portal, the nice thing about if you use the portal to submit testimony, written testimony, and you show up to testify in front of a committee, it's great because then you don't have to bring your 20 copies of your testimony. If you don't submit by the portal, you just write a letter and you come to Augusta, you bring 20 copies of what you've written down. Generally, no more than 2 pages, and you certainly don't want to read 2 pages. I think 2 pages of information is great. You can hit the highlights when you speak. Sometimes there's a 3-minute, there's a sign-in if it's crowded. There's a 3-minute limit if it's crowded and there's a lot of people. You basically wait until the bill sponsors and the legislators have spoken, and then they'll ask for people to speak for a bill and then people to speak against. And if it's really big, they'll go back and forth between the for and against. You just stand up at the podium just like this. You address the committee and then return to your seat. The really, really nice thing about the Maine legislature, there's 2 committees, or 2 things. One is I learned that many, many, many states have House committees and Senate committees. So if you're testifying for a bill, you go to the House and you give your testimony. You wait a couple weeks until it migrates over to the Senate committee, and then you have to go back and you have to give the exact same testimony to another group of people. And this is what happens in New Hampshire. I just learned that a couple weeks ago, and I thought, that's awful. And we're really lucky. And the New Hampshire people, when I told them that we had combined committees, they were like, what? That is great. I said, yes, because especially for Maine, you're going to travel an hour or 2 hours to Augusta once. We don't want to do it twice. So we're very lucky. Our committees are combined. They're they're House and representatives and senators. They're a mix. I have to say, even at sort of the ugliest times in Augusta, the committees have always been, pretty civil, funny, entertaining. They all know each other. It's a small world. They probably know all of them. They know you. I think it's one of the, people get nervous about speaking in public or speaking in front of a committee. It's really like, it's like this. There's no pressure. There's no expectation. They'll help you if you're nervous. They'll help you feel better. It's even for people who hate public speaking, it is easy. It's easy, 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, and it really, really, I can't tell you how much of a difference it makes. In absence of testifying or showing up to testify, you can write to legislators. This is a time where really you're limited to writing to your own your own people. Even if you don't have somebody on an important committee, that's really, none of my people are on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, so I'm really limited in writing. I can't really, they just don't have any, unless they're on the committee of interest, they can't really do much for you. And they just won't another rep or senator, if you're not in their district, they're not going to listen to you, and they're really probably going to be annoyed if you bother them. So you're limited to your own committee, your own people, but still a good thing to do. And of course, you can call. All our representatives have and senators have. They don't have office phones. They're all using their personal cell phones or a work cell phone, but they are generally, I think, happy to take calls. You know, and throughout the process, being courteous and professional and is always appreciated. And in fact, they'll speak up if you see somebody in the committees being belligerent or unpleasant. But in general, the committees I've seen, they'll speak up and ask for that person to cease and desist. So it's really a very pleasant environment. Just a few quick things. I'm almost done, but a few things about tracking bills. Every bill has an LD number. If you get a legislative alert or you want, I can always share our tracking information too with you. They go by LD numbers. You can always look up what's happened with an LD. When you get to this page, what's really cool is when I mentioned before about submitting testimony electronically through the portal, it automatically gets added here, even if you weren't at the public hearing. If you submit it electronically, it gets added here. And so this was LD 959, which if you haven't heard already, we have to just keep telling you how great it is. We got Maine Lakes and Lake Stewards of Maine each get $75,000 a year to run, for us, Lake Smart, and for them, the volunteer lake monitoring program. So this is a bill, and this is really exciting. We had 84 people testifying, and I think all of those were in favor. I think maybe one group was neither for nor against. So very exciting. Here you can read through, you can read everyone's testimony. Really helps if you're going to call your legislator and you want some background information. You can cruise through these links, read through people's testimony, and sound like an expert really pretty quickly. And I have done that many times. You know, the septic one was a great one. There's great testimony on septics in there for the septic bill that passed. And the other thing you can follow is what's happened with the committee. So OTP is ought to pass. AM is as amended. So there's amendments to the bill. OTP is generally a good thing. If it's if it's OTNP, it's ought not, ONTP, ought not to pass or ought to pass. Whatever the committee does, votes as a committee, will be, you can follow here. You can keep up to date. So then from the committee, when a bill is, depending on the vote, no matter, unless if the vote is for the majority is it ought not to pass, the bill dies, doesn't go anywhere. If it's the majority is ought to pass, or what we often hope if it's a good bill is a unanimous ought to pass, it goes forward. And it moves to the originating chamber. So wherever the main sponsor of the bill, if they're in the House, it goes to the House, then the Senate, or vice versa. And the bills get voted on. They don't all get voted on. If it's a unanimous ought to pass out of a committee, oftentimes that doesn't even go to a full vote. It goes out, they call it going under the hammer. They read it out, and if there's no objection, it gets approved and enacted. Then it goes to the governor. This was the governor signing the septic bill, which she did on Earth Day. She'll sign it. There's can go back for vetoes if the governor vetoes a passed bill. We all know about that because for 8 years we had some insane number of vetoes, many orders of magnitude more than normal. So hopefully our heavy veto days are done. And then the bill becomes a law when it's done. Generally, most bills take place go into effect 90 days. Just really quickly, advocacy in DC. Not too much going on there right now. It's really hard there's definitely no pro-environmental bills in DC. It's really a matter of being on the defense. Clean Waters of the United States we've been involved with. There's some EPA pollutant rules. NRCM and Maine Audubon and Maine Lakes, we have occasional federal action alerts. We really rely on NRCM to keep us up to date. And of course, if you're in DC, always good to visit your delegation. They're always happy to have you. They have a certain Wednesdays, I think, are Maine Visitor Day or Maine Residence Day. If you want to go see, I think it varies between our reps. But Always good idea to visit. I'm going to wrap up really quickly with your to-do list, which is to go home, and I'm going to follow up with an email to everybody who came to the conference. So, when you read this, I'm really directing this at all you all. Finding your district and your legislators, writing them down. We're in the middle of a session, so they're going to be there for the next 18 months. So finding them, writing down their names, their contact information. I would love it if you would contact them before the next session and just share a personal story. Just tell them something about lakes and why you're interested in lake conservation, why you're passionate, and then sign up for MaineLakeSociety.org if you want to hear about when to go to Augusta, what particular bills are really important, and then I really have the fourth one, but it'd be great. Just challenge yourself to to show up in Augusta at a committee meeting. Prepare some testimony. If we had more time, we could have done a little mock hearing. Maybe next year at this meeting, we'll do a little mock hearing. But it would be just amazing if you all would just make I won't make you make a verbal commitment. Maggie said that's what works, but maybe you could just nod quietly at me and say you'll do it. Sometime this next session, there's bound to be a lake bill that we need your support on. So, and then Maine Lakes we're always here. So I am happy to answer any questions. I'm happy to help you with your lake association if you want to mobilize your lake association. Any alert we have, we encourage that to be passed on to lake association members, and just keep in touch. So thank you so much.